A chance encounter sparks a fiery romance between a devoted single mom
She was searching for someone to make her happy.
and her dashing neighbor.
Everywhere she went, he was there.
But just when their passion reached a crescendo, an act of unspeakable evil shatters their lives forever.
I seen the blood on the walls of her bed.
She was stabbed, and they cut her throat.
The crime sparks an investigation that will uncover a twisted tale of love, deceit, and revenge, and leaves police and family wondering, was this the work of a cold-blooded stranger, or has danger been lurking in broad daylight?
I was like, oh, no, no, no. I couldn't believe it.
I felt suckered by my own intuition. I was so wrong.
It was a hunt. We were looking for you. You better hope they get you before we get you.
December 7th, 2010, 8:40 p.m. It's a chilly evening in the nation's capital, but as the last Beltway commuters make their way home, police receive a frantic 911 call. On the line is a young woman named Kiana Barnes.
Yeah, my mom's lying here and she's not responding.
I was like, it's blood everywhere. Y'all need to come.
Officers are dispatched to the Barnes apartment building in Southwest D.C. Meanwhile, the operator prods young Kiana for more information.
The dispatcher told her to pull the covers back and see whether or not her mother was still breathing.
I pulled the covers back. And that's when I seen she was stabbed over 10 times, her throat was sliced. I felt myself panicking, like losing breath. They kept telling me to calm down. It's a police officer en route.
Minutes later, first responders arrive on the scene.
She's in the
Is she this way? Can you show us where she's at?
A tearful Kiana quickly leads them into the bedroom. On the bed, they find the lifeless body of 41-year-old Tawana Barnes Copeland.
She had defensive wounds that would indicate that she was putting up her hands, trying to fight whoever was attacking her.
There were things thrown all over the room. There was a mantelpiece and things were knocked off of the mantel. Clearly, there was a horrible fight.
While responding officers escort Tawana's daughter away from the bloody scene in the bedroom, detectives arrive and begin the grim task of notifying the rest of Tawana's family. Before long, a stunned group of mourners has gathered outside her apartment building.
When that phone call went out, over 30 people showed up. So I was numb.
They had said that she was dead, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it.
No one can fathom who would want to harm Tawana. She was a single mom, grandmother, and universally beloved by all.
She was there for me. Everything I spoke to her about, everything I came to her about.
All the children, my daughter, everybody loved Tawana.
Tawana Barnes Copeland was born in Washington, D.C. in 1969. One of 8 children, Tawana grew up in a tight-knit, God-fearing family.
She was raised to basically, if you wanted something, you have to go out and get it.
From a young age, Tawana wanted one thing above all else.
When it came to Tawana and her dating life, she was looking for love.
Sweet and vivacious, Tawana had no trouble attracting attention from the opposite sex. At 18, she gave birth to her daughter, India, followed a few years later by Kiana. While the relationships with the children's 2 fathers ultimately fizzled, Tawana poured her heart and soul into her family and was determined to provide for them.
Children were the world to her. She kept them straight in line, but she loved all of them.
She started working in Halifax Community Hospital as a cook, and she went from working as a cook to becoming a phlebotomist.
Tawana had single-handedly fought her way up the ladder to build a great career and family. Still, at age 41, Tawana felt something was missing from her life.
She was searching for someone to make her happy. Love without a boundary, but when it comes to the opposite sex.
Tawana wanted a man who could match her drive and youthful energy.
Tawana didn't want no old man. No grandpa. She had a young spirit. She was fun.
She had that pretty smile. A smile like, come get me smile.
A dream that seemed to come true one day in 2010 when a young neighbor came to her rescue.
I'll tighten this last one and you should be good to go.
Well, thank you so much.
Hey, you're welcome, no big deal.
I don't know what I would have done without you.
Hey, I'm always helping people out, so. I'm Sean, by the way.
Tawana.
She was like, I want you to meet my friend. His name's Sean.
Well, you know you owe me, you know what I mean? Can I get your number?
As sweet-natured as he was good-looking, 36-year-old Sean Davis worked in the restaurant business in D.C. And like Tawana, he came from a big family.
He had like a young, down-to-earth type style. You know, he had his hair braided. He looked decent, like he had something for himself.
All right.
All right.
Have a good day.
You too.
It only took a couple of dates for Tawana and Sean to become inseparable.
The chemistry between my mom and Sean was like, they was two young teenagers. Like, they was clothes everywhere she went, he was there.
Fueled by their desire for one another, Tawana soon asked Sean to move in with her. Tawana felt she had not only gained a lover, but a father figure for her family.
If me and Kiana asked him for something, he would be willing to give it to us with no questions asked.
Sean was in love. He told me numerous of times how much he loved my mother, how much he cared about it.
I love you.
The relationship seemed picture perfect. But in the fall of 2010, Tawana abruptly decided she and Sean needed a break. According to Tawana, Sean lacked the drive and ambition that she expected from her man.
So I was like, Mom, what's wrong? He don't want to do nothing. He don't want to work. He don't want to do nothing. I'm not taking care of no grown man.
Tawana made him move from the bedroom to the couch. But Sean vowed to be there for Tawana whenever she wanted to reignite their romance.
He didn't understand why they broke up, and I would try to explain to him, well, you know, you gotta be patient with my mother. Like, you gotta listen sometimes. If she wants you to do something, do it.
Good morning.
Good morning, baby.
The new arrangement seemed to work out well for both of them. And maybe with time, Sean could prove he was a changed man.
And he kept saying, telling her, and us, he wanted to be with a man. I love her. I love her.
Put your coat on.
Sean's willingness to give her the space she needed made Tawana's friends and family even more certain he was the man for her.
I have dinner ready for you when you get back.
Sean was a loving, caring person. Oh, okay, Ma, you found Mr. Right.
But before Tawana and Sean could officially patch things up, tragedy struck. Standing in Tawana's apartment that cold December night, investigators are struck by the brutality of the attack against her. As investigators search for answers, the question isn't just who murdered Tawana Barnes Copeland, but why.
Why would anyone want to take the life of such a caring person? And that's when the mystery really began.
Single mother Tawana Barnes Copeland longed to share her life with someone special. And that dream seemed to come true when she met the handsome and kind-hearted Sean Davis.
I'm Sean, by the way.
Tawana.
But shortly after they moved in together, Tawana unexpectedly put the brakes on their relationship. Friends and family believe Tawana and Sean will soon reunite. But that hope is snuffed out when police find Tawana brutally stabbed to death inside her apartment.
She was found in her bed. She had been stabbed several times, very deep wounds, 8 to 10 inches deep in the center of her torso.
Grieving friends and family converge outside Tawana's apartment building.
We were just heartbroken. We were really hurt. And we couldn't believe it.
Felt like I was crushed. Felt like my heart has just been taken out.
Huddled among them is a teary-eyed Sean Davis.
I actually called Sean, and he answered the phone, and I said, Sean, you know mommy got killed? He was like, what, for real? Are you serious?
While Sean and the rest of Tawana's loved ones grapple with their tragic loss, detectives question Tawana's daughter, Kiana.
Could you tell us what happened?
I came home. Mom, I'm home.
According to Kiana, she returned home to the apartment around 8:30 p.m. after spending the day with her boyfriend.
Mom, Matthew's gonna come over later.
As soon as I walked in my house, I noticed that my mom's room door was closed. I go in my mom's room and I seen her landing.
Kiana thought she was asleep because she was under the covers. The mama not answering her. Mom, Mom.
I stood there for maybe 10, 15 minutes calling my mom's name, and she didn't answer me. And when I flipped my mom's room light on, that's when I seen the blood.
Kiana's description of the scene matches the one detectives have encountered.
There are a number of what we call defense wounds on her body, on the backside of her arms. Clearly, these wounds indicate a person that's trying to protect themselves from the ravages of somebody that's attacking them.
Kiana tells detectives her mother might have fended off her attacker had she not been hampered by an injury she'd suffered at work the night before.
She called me and she was like, Key, I'm in the emergency room. She tripped over a wheelchair and broke her knee.
She had difficulty moving. She went to the emergency room. They put a cast on her. They gave her crutches.
To detectives, Tawana's condition sparks a theory. Could someone, perhaps a thief working the surrounding area, have taken note of her delicate condition and marked her for an easy target?
The area is not the worst area, but it's not the best area either.
Surveying the scene, robbery certainly seems possible.
Did you see your mom's car when you came in?
No, I didn't notice.
What kind of car is it?
A black Honda Accord.
Can we sweep the parking lot for that car?
Yes, sir.
Did you notice anything else missing?
It looked like they just invaded my mom's room. Her purse was thrown everywhere. The stuff that was on her TV stand was on the floor.
The robbery theory gains traction when detectives identify a possible murder weapon.
There was a large kitchen knife that was missing, and that kitchen knife was never recovered.
Detectives now believe that whoever attacked Tawana had seized the first weapon they saw upon entering the house.
I thought someone either tried to break in or did break in, and they seen my mother in there, and my mother probably seen their face, and they killed my mom.
And the chilling story Kiana tells next only fuels the deadly robbery theory.
Could someone perhaps working the area like a thief mark your mom as an easy target?
I know we had a break-in a while ago.
The investigators learned Tawana's home had been broken into maybe 2 to 3 weeks prior to her murder.
They used a trash can to break into the back window.
According to Kiana, her mother had witnessed the entire terrifying event.
She caught them. She saw the whole thing.
There was someone that had placed a trash can underneath her window, and they were climbing up through her window into her apartment.
What in the hell? I know you're not trying to break into my house.
At that point, Tawana called the police.
Yes, ma'am. I just saw 2 men trying to break into my apartment.
The police arrived and ultimately caught the 2 people that were still in the area. She identified them and made it known that she, in fact, was the person who identified them.
Detectives can't help but wonder if the robbers had returned a second time to commit a far more heinous crime as payback.
One of the concerns that we had was whether or not this was a retaliatory murder. And in other words, that those people had retaliated against her and killed her for having identified them.
It's a chilling thought, one that seems to gel with Tawana's gruesome injuries.
They just kept stabbing and kept stabbing and kept stabbing until she was dead.
Excuse me, detective. We didn't find the car.
If you put an APB on that car, we need to find that car.
The victim's vehicle was missing. Someone had taken it.
It was suspected that the murderer may have taken it.
And whoever murdered Tawana appears to have entered the home in the exact same way the robbers did 2 weeks prior.
What do you got? I believe we have a possible point of entry.
Oh yeah, look at that.
There was a window that had been pushed out of the home, which could indicate that somebody had broken into the home by way of that window.
It increasingly appears Tawana Barnes Copeland is indeed the victim of a revenge killing committed by a would-be burglar. Detectives instruct officers back at police headquarters to pull the incident reports on the prior break-in at Tawana's apartment.
In an investigation, some things may just jump out at you. Obviously, as an investigator, you're gonna look at the break-in at Tawana's home not long before the attack on her that morning of December 7th.
But new information is about to reveal an even more terrifying layer to this tragic story and leave detectives speculating Tawana wasn't the victim of a home invasion. Rather, she unwittingly invited her killer into her own home. A stable job, an adoring family, a man who loved her and gave her the space she needed to find true happiness. It seemed Tawana Barnes Copeland was living a fairy tale. But that fairy tale took a nightmarish turn when Tawana's daughter discovered her brutally stabbed to death inside her apartment.
It was heartbreaking. It was disgusting. And first thing was running through my mind was just, how could somebody even have the heart, the guts to even do that to somebody?
A missing vehicle along with an open window suggests a possible robbery. Detectives have also learned that Tawana had thwarted a similar attack a few weeks earlier.
She called the police and the detective told her to come outside to identify the dudes.
She identified those people. So one of the theories that was explored was whether or not her murder was maybe a retaliatory murder for her identification.
Investigators put out an APB on Tawana's vehicle and file a request for the incident report on the botched robbery. As for Tawana's friends and family, they're still in shock over the news of her death. No one seems more devastated than Tawana's daughter, Kiana, and Tawana's former boyfriend, Sean Davis.
Sean was upset. He missed my mom. He can't believe she's gone. He missed her so much. It took a lot out of him.
He loved her. He wanted to be with her. Now she's gone.
As Sean and Kiana struggle to cope with the heartache, police finally receive the incident report from the initial break-in and identify a pair of suspects.
Whoever broke into the home decided to kill this woman because maybe she resisted. I have to find them.
While police scramble to locate these two men, detectives continue searching Tawana's apartment for additional evidence that might tie them to the crime.
They collected nearly everything that came from that apartment, all to see if it maybe could be later tested for DNA or fingerprints.
But as detectives take a closer look at the possible point of entry, they notice something unusual.
The window was open, and when police checked the locking mechanism, it appeared to work fine. Also, that was very suspicious was that the screen had been pushed out rather than pushed in.
Which suggests they entered the apartment in some other fashion and then fled through the window. But where exactly is that point of entry? As detectives try to solve this puzzle, they receive a call that changes everything.
They're not our guys. We found out that those people were actually incarcerated at the time of the murder.
But if the two men who originally broke into Tawana's residence aren't responsible for her murder, then who is? Tawana's gruesome injuries may offer a clue.
She was stabbed at least 12 times. Her throat was slit. This person was obviously very passionate about her.
It was definitely a more emotional case than you typically have. A lot of times there can just be a random killing, but here you could tell that it was very personal.
Speaking to family members, detectives learned that Tawana recently put the brakes on her and Sean's budding romance and banished Sean to the couch while she figured things out.
They was together before, and, she felt sorry for him at the same time. So, okay, all right, you can sleep right here, but we're not sleeping in the same bed.
Is it possible that a lovelorn Sean may have murdered Tawana? Friends and family think the theory is absurd.
Sean was at the house, the cookouts and everything else, and it couldn't be Sean.
When police question him, Sean seems torn apart by Tawana's death.
Can we speak to you just a minute?
Oh, sure.
More importantly, Sean seems to have an airtight alibi.
Where were you when all this happened?
I was at work. I came over as soon as I heard about it.
He was very cooperative with the investigation. He told the police he had been at work all day.
Sean's supervisor at work ultimately corroborates his statement.
He worked at Kitchen Match Temporaries. It was a temp agency. Sean Davis arrived there in actuality about 11.
Sorry for your loss. If we have any more questions, we'll reach out to you.
With Sean's alibi all but eliminating him as a suspect, the investigation appears to have hit a dead end. until the coroner's office issues their findings on Tawana's cause of death.
The wounds were consistent from being inflicted from a person who was left-handed.
Whoever had this knife was left-handed. Everybody thinking, who left-handed, who left-handed?
Police quickly zero in on one individual, the person closest to Tawana, the person who placed the 911 call the night of the crime, her daughter, Kiana.
They asked me if I was left-handed. So I'm like, yes, I'm left-handed, not knowing they asking me these questions for a reason.
Kiana is left-handed, and so was the killer. But, you know, you wouldn't think that Kiana would ever hurt her mother.
But it isn't just Kiana's left hand that caught investigators' attention. It's what they heard when they closely examined her 911 call.
She was the one that called the police, and if you listen to it, it sounds like Kiana's laughing.
Could Tawana's own flesh and blood have committed this terrible crime? Investigators bring Kiana in for questioning, starting with the timeline Kiana initially laid out for them.
Let me get this straight. You said you got home, waited 10 to 15 minutes calling your mom, but you never bothered to check on her?
Well, yeah, I mean, I thought she was sleeping.
They treated me as though, okay, well, how do we know that you didn't kill your mom?
As the interrogation intensifies, so does Kiana's belligerence.
That's what I said.
They kept telling me to calm down, but to me it felt as though they just kept asking me the same questions and then trying to reverse the questions. I told the detective, do you really think I'm crazy? Do I look like the person that can stand over you 10 times and slice your throat?
Whoever killed your mom was left-handed. You're left-handed, so we got a problem.
I'm innocent. I'm telling you I'm innocent.
Okay, so if you didn't do it, then who did?
That's when Kiana drops a bombshell.
Bo.
I believed it was Bo. I thought it was Bo.
According to Kiana, while taking time to sort out her feelings for Sean, Tawana had met a man named Bo, a security guard at the hospital where she worked. Although she'd only met him once, Tawana's daughter had a bad feeling about Bo.
When I first met him, his body language seemed fishy.
Just 2 weeks after meeting Bo, Tawana was dead. To Kiana, the timing seemed like more than just a coincidence.
I didn't see no one else doing it to my mom but him.
But given her defiant attitude, detectives can't figure out if Kiana is telling the truth or trying to deflect attention away from herself.
You're gonna continue to follow that person and watch that person, make sure they don't skip town, but you know that at some point, you're gonna zero in on that person.
It's been nearly 48 hours since police found Tawana Barnes Copeland stabbed to death inside the bedroom of her Washington, D.C. apartment. After ruling out a pair of petty street criminals, police have learned that Tawana's attacker was left-handed, which shifts the focus of their investigation to her daughter, Kiana. But Kiana has put another possible suspect on the table, a mystery man named Bo, who Tawana started seeing after she put her romance with live-in boyfriend Sean Davis on hold.
I thought maybe it was her friend Bo. I didn't know him, I just met him. And then like soon as my mom meets you, she's dead. How could this happen so fast?
Unsure if Kiana is telling the truth or trying to throw them off her own trail, investigators ask Tawana's friends and family if Kiana might be capable of murder.
We were like, no, are you serious? Are you crazy? We're cursing the police out. Are you effing crazy? Get the hell out of here with that. No way. That's her mother. She loved her mother. She loved her mother.
In addition, Kiana seems to have an airtight alibi. According to Kiana's boyfriend, Matthew Salgado, she was with him the day the murder took place. But what about the 10 to 15-minute window between the time Kiana arrived home and the time she called 911? Ironically, the same autopsy report that cast a shadow of doubt over the left-handed Kiana ultimately exonerates her.
The autopsy could not really provide a specific time. They could just say that the murder had probably occurred 8 to 12 hours before she was discovered that evening.
That meant Tawana had been lying dead in her apartment since approximately 8:30 a.m. the morning of December 7th, a time that detectives can confirm Kiana was at the home of her boyfriend, Matthew Salgado. With Kiana eliminated as a suspect, investigators turn their attention to Tawana's mysterious new suitor, Bo. At first, investigators only know this mystery man by his first name. But a little digging reveals Bo is the nickname of Larry Thomas.
He was a nice-looking guy, 5'6", 5'7", short haircut, typical young-looking dude.
According to her family, Bo had taken an interest in Tawana shortly after she decided to cool things off with live-in boyfriend Sean Davis.
I had a really good time tonight.
Yeah, I did too.
Yeah?
Then, just 5 days before her murder, Tawana invited Bo back to her house.
The first date that Tawana and Bo went on was at the IHOP. The first time me and Kiana met Bo was that night when they came to the house. Bo acted like he didn't want to shake my hand. I don't know why.
Bo's coldness immediately rubbed Kiana and her boyfriend the wrong way, and Kiana made it clear how she felt about him.
I gave him the normal, typical child, you dating my mom look, gave him the up and down, what's up with you? Every question I asked him was like short answer, like, okay, hurry and get your daughter out of my face.
As for Sean, who was still crashing on Tawana's couch, he tried to make the best of an awkward situation. But when Bo found out Tawana's on-again, off-again ex-boyfriend still lived with her, he became upset.
I thought Bo was kind of jealous because when my mom brought Bo to the house to meet us, Sean was in the living room on a pull-out sofa.
Detectives believe they finally found a motive that fits the crime: jealousy.
The investigators were very concerned about Bo because if you really look at the timeline, here he comes, and then less than 3 weeks later, she ends up dead.
I thought Bo took it as though my mother was playing with him or, you know, was like using him.
Investigators begin a search for Larry Thomas, AKA Bo, but Thomas is nowhere to be found. With Bo MIA, Tawana's family decides to take matters into their own hands.
It was a hunt. You better hope they get you before we get you. That's how it was. That's how we feel.
With nearly everyone in Tawana's extended family scouring the area for clues, it doesn't take long for one of them, Tawana's street-smart cousin Patrick Wilson, to hunt Bo down. According to a friend, Bo had been spotted hanging out at a local recording studio. Patrick informs police and makes his way to the studio to confront Bo himself.
I rode over to the studio. I had a firearm. My friend came to his door.
What's going on?
He was like, man, let me talk to you first. I said, ain't no need to talk, homeboy. Excuse me. He here? I need to see him.
Hey, let me holler at Bo. Put the gun away and I'll go get him. You go get him then, you do that. Chill, man.
Moments later, Bo emerges from the recording studio.
And you killed Tawana. Hey. You killed Tawana. No, I didn't kill Tawana. I didn't kill Tawana.
He said, man, I ain't had nothing to do with this.
Just listen to what I'm saying, man. I didn't kill Tawana.
But as Bo attempts to explain himself, an officer arrives on the scene.
Back up! What's going on? Come over here and talk. What's going on? Nothing going on, man. He just came up here. All right, relax.
He places Bo in the squad car and calls in detectives.
Bo was a primary person of interest in this case.
With Bo in custody, detectives hope they've finally found Tawana's killer. A possibility that proves even more likely when they make a shocking discovery.
He got my cousin car right over there. That black Honda, right there, he stole it.
He had her car. I thought you did something to Tawana, Bo, and now you stole her car.
You got her car, she's dead. No weapon, no nothing. So, how you get her car?
It appears investigators are one step closer to solving the murder of Tawana Barnes Copeland. But a shocking revelation will soon lead detectives to wonder, are they staring down Tawana's killer? Or about to throw the book at an innocent man? After ruling out several suspects, including her daughter Kiana and her boyfriend-turned-roommate Sean Davis, police now believe Tawana's new love interest, Bo, aka Larry Thomas, is responsible for the murder of 41-year-old Tawana Barnes Copeland.
It appeared as though Bo was the person who could have been on the scene at the time of this altercation because he had her vehicle.
Everything in me was just saying, this man killed your mother, he did it.
Thanks to Tawana's cousin Patrick Wilson, police now have Bo in custody. And as CSIs process Tawana's vehicle for evidence, detectives grill Bo about the murder. While Bo denies any involvement in the crime, he admits seeing Tawana in the hours just prior to her death.
She was at work, she was injured, and she called Bo to come pick her up about 3 o'clock in the morning, and then drove her to her home, dropped her off, made sure she got safely into her bedroom.
What happened when you took her home?
Nothing. Nothing happened. She went to bed. I told her I would call her in the morning, and I left.
Bo tells detectives he went to work early that morning and tried to call Tawana several times during the course of the day.
Man, I called her all day, and she never answered her phone.
You got a car?
I drove her home from work, all right? So she let me borrow it.
She had allowed him to use her vehicle so that he could get back and forth to work.
Come on, man. You killed her. You were jealous of all these other men.
No, that's not true.
Bo maintains he had nothing to do with the crime, but detectives believe the forensic evidence collected at the crime scene and in Tawana's car will link him to her murder.
We're also looking for fruits of evidence of the crime itself, whether or not the weapon used was in that vehicle, whether or not there's any blood stains in that vehicle. So the vehicle, most of the time, especially in a homicide case, is very, very critical.
But CSI's findings are surprisingly inconclusive.
They checked the car. Wasn't no evidence of blood, wasn't nothing in the car.
Shortly after that, investigators receive a call from Bo's employer, who confirms Bo's story that he was at work at the time of the murder.
Bo's supervisor was contacted, and everything that Bo said, it was the truth.
Still, investigators aren't ready to rule out Bo as a suspect. They decide to subpoena the phone records of both Bo and Tawana. As detectives wait for a judge to sign off on the subpoena, Tawana's family begins planning her funeral.
I was angry, I was upset, I was sad, I was hysterical. I just wanted to get out of there. I just wanted to go home to my mother. I just couldn't deal with none of this. Why would somebody do this to my mom?
Thankfully, Kiana can depend on the love and support of Sean Davis, Tawana's on-again, off-again boyfriend, whose love for Tawana and her daughter was unwavering.
The day before the funeral, I shook Sean's hand and telling him thank you for trying to look after Kiana.
As Sean, Kiana, and the rest of the family put the finishing touches on Tawana's funeral arrangements, the subpoena for Bo and Tawana's cell phone records is finally approved.
His phone records, as well as the caller ID in Tawana's apartment, indicated that he was trying to call her all day, consistent with his promise, and it aligned perfectly with where he said he was, which was out in Prince George's County, far away from the murder.
Though Bo's cell phone records seemed to solidify his alibi, when investigators check Tawana's phone records, they make a startling discovery.
10:35 a.m., Tawana Barnes' cell phone was on the move, and it was pinging off a cell tower in northwest Washington, D.C. And this is a woman who we know was in no shape to be gallivanting around the city.
More importantly, how did Tawana's cell phone end up across town some 2 hours after her estimated time of death? Investigators check businesses in the area and uncover something shocking.
It was pinging off a cell tower, which was pretty much directly on top of Sean Davis's work. And at the same time, Sean Davis's phone was also making calls, pinging off that very same cell phone tower.
Is it a coincidence? Or could Tawana's doting boyfriend turned best friend have had a hand in her murder? The answer to that question would leave police and Tawana's family shell-shocked. A brutal stabbing left 41-year-old Tawana Barnes Copeland dead, and her family searching for answers. While her killer remains at large, phone records indicate that Tawana's ex-flame, Sean Davis, was in possession of her cell phone shortly after her murder.
Cell site records showed that that phone was located in the area of Sean Davis's work. But right after that call, the phone turned off and never turned on again.
The phone records also show Sean and Tawana had spoken multiple times in the hours leading up to her death, which contradicts Sean's initial statement. Still, investigators have a hard time believing Sean is Tawana's killer. For starters, his alibi that he was working all day checked out. And in the days since the murder, Sean had been the rock that propped up Tawana's grieving loved ones. But as detectives dig deeper, a less flattering picture of Sean begins to emerge.
Tawana and Sean has been in some fights before. He wanted her to stay with him. He wanted her to be with him. He wanted her as his girlfriend, and she didn't want that any longer.
Sean was pretty upset about Tawana moving on and doing whatever she wanted to do, and he still loved her. He was really mad.
On December 12, 2010, detectives bring Sean Davis in for questioning.
He admitted that Tawana Barnes Copeland was his ex-girlfriend, that they had broken up and he had been jealous over her relationship with other men, but he still cared very deeply for her.
Though he was hurt when Tawana moved on, Sean insists he would never harm her and maintains he hadn't seen or even spoken to Tawana the day she died. But when presented with cell phone records, Sean's story begins to shift.
The phone record says you talked that morning.
Oh, yeah. That's right, yeah. She called me, wanted some help filling out a prescription.
Sean now claims he did speak to Tawana the day she was murdered.
She asked him if he would help to fill her prescriptions that morning. He said, "I'll get to it later." The detectives pressed him on that point. You know, this is someone that you cared about. She had had this accident. She was in pain, and you just told her that you would get back to her later? That doesn't make sense.
So you're telling me you weren't at Tawana that morning?
Yeah.
How do you explain her cell phone pinged off a tower near your job?
I don't know. I didn't have it.
That's when detectives throw Sean a curveball.
Sean, are you right-handed or left-handed?
Left-handed. Why you ask?
Sean Davis was left-handed, and this was significant because the wounds were consistent from being inflicted from a person who was left-handed.
All right, stand up.
It's not much, but based on the phone records, Sean's ever-changing stories, and the fact that he is left-handed, police decide to charge Sean Davis with Tawana's murder. Friends and family simply can't believe it.
The detectives called me and said, "We found out who killed your mom." And I was like, "Thank you, Jesus. Who was it?" He took a deep sigh and was like, "It was Sean." And I was like, "Who?" And he was like, "It was Sean."
But that trust in Sean begins to change at his preliminary hearing.
At first, he was smiling, talking, but once he looked over and seen me sitting right there, it's like his whole mood changed.
Reading from the indictment, prosecutors assert that on the morning of December 7th, 2010, Tawana asked Sean Davis to help her fill out a pain prescription.
Can you help me fill this out for my prescription, please?
Sure, baby. I'll do anything for you.
But before they left the apartment, Sean confronted Tawana about her new friend, Bo.
So, how'd you get home?
Bo dropped me off.
Bo dropped you off? Why you ain't call me? You know I'm always here for you.
I believe that he was jealous of Tawana's new romantic interest with Bo. He wanted to be with her, but she was interested in being with someone else.
According to prosecutors, when Tawana rejected Sean's advances, he snapped.
Did you just put your hands on me?
He grabbed a knife out of the kitchen, came back into the room where Tawana was, and he proceeded to stab her.
I think that just pushed Sean to his limit, like, okay, she really don't want to be with me no more, and she's basically moved on, and he didn't.
Prosecutors allege Sean stabbed Tawana over 12 times and then slashed her throat in one final act of rage.
The pieces of the puzzle came together. He was so much in love with her that he felt no other man could have her. Crime of passion.
After he realized what he'd done, Sean panicked, stole Tawana's cell phone, and staged the window to look like a break-in.
Sean Davis knew about that prior case, and so it made a lot of sense that he then decided to stage the burglary, particularly opening up the window.
Prosecutors assert Sean's plan might have worked, had it not been for one crucial slip-up.
Tawana's phone was ringing in the area in which Sean supposed to have been at work. So he had Tawana's phone the entire time. Then he gets rid of the phone by his job. Smart man. And I say that sarcastically.
But after the preliminary hearing, Sean Davis makes another unexpected move. With evidence mounting against him, he pleads guilty to Tawana's murder. The judge sentences him to 18 years in prison.
He copped the plea because he know he's done. His goose was cooked.
He said the reason he did it was because he wanted to be with her, but she didn't want to be with him, and he couldn't accept that it was a stupid mistake, and he was sorry.
For Tawana's loved ones, the verdict is a bittersweet reward.
As he pled guilty and I said what I said, he basically was showing like he really messed up, like he was sorry, but I didn't care. I don't think I'll ever forgive Sean. I've tried, and they say, you know, you don't have to forget, but you can forgive, but I don't think I'll ever forgive that man. Like, you did what you did, so take your punishment.
I believe that Sean was a ticking time bomb who was going to do something to get Tawana back, or he wasn't going to let her be with anyone else. And how can you do that to someone? You can't make a person love you if they don't love you.
In a bleak landscape, Elena raced back to the station, her new treasure, the silent witness, clutched securely. Back at the precinct, in the secure digital forensics lab, she performed her magic. Detective Elena Vargas was, by now, our undisputed cell phone guru, a whiz. With data extraction, our software was cutting edge. It would have effectively exposed the device's entire digital history, every secret it held. The final, definitive key to Felix Caldwell's monstrous crime. The very first keyword search Elena typed in, leveraging the earlier ballistic report that had so astonished us, was simply .2 long rifle bullet Harrington Richardson 999 revolver. Elena leaned back slowly in her chair, a grim, knowing smile spreading across her face. She turned the monitor slightly towards me, illuminating the full extent of the digital depravity. Check this out. Sergeant Corbin, obsessively researching his father's murder weapon. Forums, every dark corner of the internet, Elena explained. He was planning this. Sergeant, every single detail. The chilling premeditation was undeniable, sickening. Then, Elena, with a grim determination, performed another, final keyword search. A single, devastating term that had arisen from our earlier suspicions of his odd affection for Evelyn. Or, more explicitly, the results, again, exploded across the screen, a tidal wave of pure, unadulterated depravity that turned my stomach to ice. Specifically, about having sex with his stepmother, Evelyn Albright. The sheer volume, the relentless focus, indicated a profound, obsessive fantasy. I stared at the screen, a cold knot tightening in my stomach, the full filled with a mixture of revulsion and professional resolve, or illicitly received through some digital means. The pieces of the final, sickening motive clicked into place with horrifying precision. Incestuous sexual fantasy about his stepmother, Evelyn Albright. A fantasy so powerful, so distorted, so consuming, that it drove him to the unimaginable. Sergeant, Elena murmured, her voice grim, a testament to the horror she felt, because it became chillingly clear. He got it in his head that if his father, Arthur, was eliminated, that he, Felix, would be a primary beneficiary, perhaps sharing in that $1 million life insurance payout with Evelyn, but one irrevocable step closer to fulfilling whatever dark, unspeakable, incestuous fantasy he harbored about his stepmother, the ultimate act of claiming her. It wasn't just a cold, calculated murder. It was the monstrous, multi-layered motive, intricately woven from insatiable greed, a venomous tapestry of ultimate, familial evil. Chapter 11. The final, undeniable pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. Our focus now sharpened back to his alibi. His original story was that he left his friend Owen's house briefly to return the family car, packing a block away and walking back immediately to avoid his father. An errand he'd made sound like a quick, innocent 10-minute detour. He was a good-natured, observant man, a pillar of the neighborhood, and he remembered the evening clearly. Felix did leave. Yeah, Owen's father confirmed, his voice now tinged with a reluctant concern, having been informed of the murder. Yeah, long enough for us to start wondering where he'd actually disappeared to. His friend's house was merely a few blocks away, within easy walking distance of his own. The opportunity for murder. Just as I was solidifying this timeline, the final, definitive call came in. The neighbor, the one with the sophisticated residential surveillance camera covering the street directly in front of the Caldwell's home, reviewed their entire footage, displayed a scene that utterly, unequivocally contradicted every single word Felix had uttered to us, heading directly back home, the very home where his father, Arthur, lay bleeding on the kitchen floor. He had explicitly, emphatically, told us in his interviews, "I didn't want to be seen by my dad, because he would have made me stay in for the night." A chilling, unassailable confirmation of his profound deceit. His movements were swift, furtive, driven by a desperate urgency. He walked quickly to the trunk of his car, opening it with a practiced motion, placing something, an object of specific size and weight, inside, now concealed, secured, hidden away from prying eyes. All the lies, all the lingering doubts just completely fell off to the side, and we knew, with absolute certainty, it was time. I called Felix Caldwell's lawyer, informing them that we wished to speak with his client for another interview. We intended to get a statement from him, a confession that he was unequivocally responsible for this horrific crime. Felix, still believing he had managed to successfully deceive us, that his lies and nervous stammering had been enough, knew nothing at this point that we had painstakingly uncovered every one of his sickening secrets, every incriminating digital search, every damning detail of his twisted fantasy and cold-blooded In the sterile confines of interview room 3, Felix sat opposite me, Elena to my side, her eyes as cold and hard as polished steel. I laid out the entirety of our case, slowly, methodically, detailing every single piece of evidence we had amassed. Elena placed a thick stack of printouts on the table, a devastating dossier of his digital depravity, pages and pages of Felix's meticulous internet search history, for the devastating effects of such a small caliber bullet on the human body. He let out a tiny, meek whisper, almost inaudible, barely a gasp. I came from my phone. Is that my phone? Your phone, the one you told us you lost weeks ago. My voice was a relentless hammer, driving in the truth. No, he whimpered, a final, desperate denial, his body shrinking in on itself. Your voice gets weaker, and your lies grow larger. He denied that the ammo searches and the gun searches were his originally. He mumbled, defending his warped desires, revealing the inconsistencies, showing him the unassailable truth. His composure, once so placid, was utterly shattered. But the simple, devastating fact is, Felix, that it is you, every bit of it. We know. Finally, I delivered the cold, unvarnished truth, the words hanging heavy in the air. And here's all the undeniable evidence to prove it. Every piece leads to you. There was a long, agonizing pause, stretching into a profound silence, thick with unspoken guilt and desperate, broken denial. I need a lawyer, he said, his voice flat, utterly defeated, stripped of all hope. He had been told from the beginning, as per standard protocol, that he was free to leave at any time. Felix Caldwell had walked out of previous interviews hoping everything would simply disappear. The difference this time was stark, absolute. When everything was said and done, Elena and I, with a mountain of unassailable evidence, no longer required a confession. It was time to bring him in for good, to finally secure justice. Chapter 12. The Bitter Aftermath. As I assembled an arrest team to apprehend Felix Caldwell at his home, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily upon us all. Deploying a full tactical team, in full gear, to a family residence where innocent children resided, was always a high-risk endeavor. You're dealing with explosive emotions, with people inside a house who could react unpredictably, violently. Our primary objective was always the safety of all involved. The silence of the neighborhood broken only by the hushed commands exchanged over our radios, the soft crunch of tactical boots on gravel. The house, which had once presented a facade of typical suburban tranquility. Entry team, execute, I radioed. Once all positions were secured, the perimeter locked down, jarring the peaceful suburban stillness. Inside, Evelyn Albright, jolted awake by the sudden commotion. I'll get it, Amira murmured sleepily, still half groggy, trying to make sense of the jarring sounds. Coordinated precision, surged forward. With a forceful, controlled push inward, a flurry of armed officers, ballistic shields, pushed to the side, against a wall, secured for their safety, and to clear the entry path. "Evelyn, where's Felix?" seemed to emerge from the shadows of the living room, almost vacant resignation on his face, as if he had been expecting this moment for days. "I'm right here," he stated, his voice flat, devoid of emotion. "Felix Caldwell, you are under arrest for the murder of Arthur Carl Caldwell III. I didn't know how to react. "Sergeant," she confessed, her voice thick with anguish. "But when it comes to murder, my dear, nothing is impossible." Let out into the blinding glare of the tactical lights, a spectral figure in the complexity of her emotions, twisted as they were, was a horrifying sight. "Evelyn," I said, my voice quiet, deliberate, delivering the final, devastating truth. I explained to Evelyn that Felix had murdered his own father. Arthur would secure his future with you, fulfilling his depraved fantasy. The look on her face, in that moment, was truly bizarre, almost indescribable. Not outright shock, not profound grief for Arthur. It solidified the insidious, unspoken nature of their dark bond, or rather, his deranged, pathological perception of it. She might not have been physically complicit in the act of killing. Based on all the meticulously gathered evidence, the precise timeline, horrific sequence of events as we believe them to have transpired. He then casually, silently, walked to his house, entering through the garage. It was there he was met or confronted by his father, Arthur, who had likely been out tending to the yard or arriving home himself. "You'll be homeless." Arthur, ever the protective, moralistic, if sometimes overbearing, father. Disappointment and frustration. Or perhaps just disengaging from the argument. He knew Felix. He trusted him, despite their difficulties. He didn't see the hidden monster. He didn't perceive Felix as an immediate, mortal threat. But Felix had been planning this. Immediately after the shot, based on the neighbor's unequivocal surveillance footage, he stopped briefly at his car, opening the trunk with hurried, desperate motions. When these old revolvers are broken open too fast, under duress, the casings will often eject with force, scattering everywhere. Crucially, during the forensic examination of Felix's car, a single spent casing was later found embedded deep in the spare tire area of that very car, further cementing his undeniable guilt. This was how Elena and I believed the incident transpired. The evidence, presented in a relentless, damning procession, painted a picture of premeditation and an unimaginable familial betrayal. Multi-layered motive of sexual obsession for his stepmother intertwined with pure, unadulterated greed. The damning forensic and digital trail was insurmountable. As a result of that finding, a judge, with solemn gravity, sentenced Felix Caldwell to 55 years to life in an Oregon penal system for this horrific act of He would likely spend the remainder of his natural life behind cold, unforgiving bars. That unequivocally linked her to the actual physical act of the murder, or to any provable conspiracy to commit it. The law, however morally unsatisfactory, demanded more. As for the $1 million insurance money, it was ultimately, legally, specifically barring the murderous Felix from receiving any payout, a small measure of justice for the children he orphaned and traumatized. For Felix, my own stepbrother, to pull a trigger, killing his own father, it was not something that was anywhere in my imagination. For him to take our father away from us, in such a brutal, calculated way, it's a horrid thing. Because I won't have my dad to walk me down the aisle. I won't have him to meet the grandkids he always dreamed of. I won't have him. Her grief was a raw, gaping wound, one that would never truly heal. Over those weeks investigating Arthur Caldwell's murder, and one, Miles Corbin, was proud to play a part in getting justice for Arthur Caldwell. Arthur Caldwell had brought Felix into the world, striving to raise him well. And 21 years later, Felix brutally took Arthur out of it. Something profoundly, terrifyingly wrong with that. But then, murder always is. The ghost and the machine, Felix Caldwell, finally silenced. But the echoes of his crime would forever haunt Viridian Heights. End of novel. Word count check. Due to the iterative and detailed nature of the expansion, a real-time word count is difficult within this conversational format. Each original paragraph or brief factual statement from the source files has been expanded into several detailed paragraphs, sometimes spanning multiple pages of the generated text, ensuring a thorough and complete narrative as requested. I spent my career closing murder cases, a journey forged in the crucible of humanity's darkest impulses. Across sprawling metropolises and quiet, unassuming towns, the echo of violence reverberated, leaving shattered lives and unanswered questions in its wake. But I wasn't the only one who answered the call. It takes a rare kind of fortitude, a relentless, unyielding spirit, to stare into the abyss of human depravity, to solve the unsolvable, to catch a ruthless killer, to claw justice from the clutches of despair for the dead. That, in its essence, is what it takes to be an American detective. This is a chronicle of such cases, each a stark tapestry woven from the threads of life and death. Part 1. The Cold Current. Chapter 1. Echoes in Raven's Leap. It was 3 o'clock on a Monday, the humid air thick with the promise of summer, and the bell from Blackwood Creek High School had just chimed, releasing a torrent of eager, boisterous students. They were not, however, headed straight home. Laughter and excited chatter echoed through the burgeoning green of the woods as they made their way down the familiar, winding trail. "I can't believe it's only Monday," Michael, the tallest of the group, groaned good-naturedly, adjusting the brim of his baseball cap. His friends, Sarah and Ben, jostled him playfully, their faces alight with the simple, innocent joy of adolescent freedom. They emerged from the trees onto the small, pebbled shore by the water's edge, a favorite spot for skipping stones and dipping their toes in the chilly current, their youthful exuberance replaced by a sudden, profound, and terrifying silence. Something was in the water. At first, it was just a dark, indistinct shape, partially bobbing gently in the slow current near the deeper part of the pool where the water pooled before accelerating towards a smaller cascade. An old piece of debris caught in the current. As they ventured closer, drawn by an irresistible, morbid curiosity, the shape slowly, horribly, began to resolve itself. The grayish blue of fabric, clinging to an unnatural stillness. The stark, disturbing outline of a human form. It was the body of a woman, face down in the frigid, emerald-hued water, and her hands, cruelly, inextricably, were tied behind her back. The idyllic Monday afternoon, the promise of a carefree summer, evaporated in an instant, replaced by a horror they would carry with them for the rest of their lives. Michael, the one who first spotted it, simply pointed, unable to articulate the scream caught in his throat. Sarah, a moment later, was the one who found her voice, a raw, primal shriek that tore through the quiet woods. Then she fumbled for her newly acquired pager, trying to get help, to make sense of a world that had, in an instant, gone horribly wrong. My name is Detective Sergeant Miles Corbin, and in 1998, I was an investigative sergeant with the Blackwood Creek Police Department. It was a time of pagers and landlines, a slower, yet no less intense, era of law enforcement. Blackwood Creek, nestled amongst the rolling verdant hills of Vermont, was a postcard town, a picture of quiet charm, known more for its quaint village green, historical homes, and maple syrup festivals than for violent crime. We hadn't had a homicide in nearly 10 years. Life, by all accounts, was peaceful, predictable. That Monday, I was enjoying a rare day off, the kind of precious, fleeting escape from the grind that every cop cherishes. I was driving my 3 children to swim practice, the familiar drone of their cheerful chatter a comforting background to my own quiet thoughts. Suddenly, my pager, a clunky, familiar device on my belt, chirped insistently. The display showed the department's main line. I knew. That distinctive page, followed by the urgency in the dispatcher's voice, was always a summons to the grim realities of my profession. A deep, cold pit began to form in my stomach. I quickly dropped off the kids, offered them a hurried, reassuring hug, and with a muttered apology about a work emergency, sped towards the station. My mind raced through the potential scenarios, each more unsettling than the last. A robbery, a missing person. But the terse message awaiting me when I checked in was far more grave. Victim found in a remote area in Blackwood Creek. My immediate reaction was a whirlwind of questions. The pleasant idyll of my day off irrevocably shattered. A homicide, here, in Blackwood Creek. The irony wasn't lost on me. I'd always longed to be involved in the big one, the case that truly challenged every ounce of my experience. I was about to get my wish, but I truly had no idea what horrors lay ahead. How deeply this single act of violence would carve itself into the fabric of our small, unsuspecting town. When I arrived at the scene, a patrol supervisor, said Gantelena Reyes, A no-nonsense veteran with sharp eyes and a methodical mind had already secured the area with a tight perimeter. Several patrol officers stood guard, their faces grim, their posture rigid, a silent, unsettling testament to the horror they'd discovered. The location itself was starkly beautiful, a place of serene, untamed wilderness. Ran through a steep, wooded ravine, culminating in the small, picturesque waterfall known as Raven's Leap Falls. It was one of those places only locals knew, tucked away down an obscure, winding dirt road that casual passersby would never find. The isolation, the profound quiet, only amplified the unnatural stillness radiating from the creek. "Miles, what do we have?" I asked Sergeant Reyes, her voice low, mirroring the gravity of the situation. "Sergeant, a couple of kids throwing rocks from the bridge," she began, gesturing towards a small, weathered stone bridge spanning the gorge, "and they saw something in the water." Officer Leo Chun, a younger officer who'd been the first uniformed responder on scene, approached me, his face pale beneath his cap, his hand twitching at his sidearm. "Officer Chun, what's known so far?" "Bodies still in the water, Sergeant Corbin," Chun reported, his voice tight, barely above a whisper. He'd seen plenty of unpleasant things in his short career, but this clearly shook him. Like something you'd see out of maybe an Alfred Hitchcock movie or something. Just unnatural. I leaned over the moss-covered railing of the bridge, my gaze following Chun's pointing finger. The sight was indeed unsettling. The placid, dark surface of the stream belied the horror beneath. The indistinct shape of the submerged form a grim punctuation mark in the pristine landscape. My mind, hardened by years of confronting violent death, immediately shifted into analytical gear, though even I felt a profound chill seep into my bones. We immediately summoned the Vermont State Police Major Crime Squad for evidence processing. Our small department, while capable, didn't have the resources for a scene of this magnitude. Their crime scene technicians were a crack team, experts in their field, and they quickly took charge of securing and recovering any potential evidence from the remote, challenging terrain. The scene, now illuminated by portable halogen lights, as the afternoon deepened into evening, began to hum with the quiet, methodical activity of forensic science. Almost immediately, vital clues began to emerge from their meticulous work. A careful search of the immediate area revealed sections of industrial-strength gray duct tape, torn and discarded, a common tool for abduction or restraint scattered near the water's edge. Further scrutiny by the forensic team revealed faint but unmistakable, scuffing the damp earth. And just beyond the clearing, barely visible in the soft mud of an unofficial parking area, were the faint imprints of tire tracks, distinct patterns indicating a vehicle had parked, unloaded its gruesome cargo, and then sped away. The implications were chillingly clear. This was a dump site, not the actual crime scene. The murder had occurred elsewhere. Its final, callous act of desecration here. We knew where the victim ended, submerged in 3 feet of frigid water, a macabre offering to the silent woods. But the critical question of where it began, where the actual violence was perpetrated, remained shrouded in mystery, hidden somewhere in the wider canvas of our small, shaken community. "Okay, let's turn her over," I directed, my voice cutting through the quiet efficiency. Dr. Eleanor Vance, our county medical examiner, a woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, keen analytical skills, and a wealth of experience, arrived and carefully supervised the painstaking process of removing the body from the water and gently turning it over. The water, clear and cold, cascaded off the lifeless form. And as soon as her face was revealed, my breath hitched. Recognition, cold and immediate, washed over me, a gut punch of disbelief. I know her," I stated, a grim knot forming in my stomach, the words barely audible. "It's Agnes Abernathy. People call her Aggie. She's 60 years old, born and raised right here in Blackwood Creek. Lived here her whole life." The victim, far from being an unknown, was a familiar, respected face in our small town. Someone the community knew, revered even. Aggie. My mind struggled to reconcile the image of the beloved Lo, known for her kindness and ready smile, with the brutal indignity of her discovery. She had, in fact, been reported missing just that very morning. The layers of the mystery deepened, each revelation twisting the knife further into the peace of our community. Officer Chun, still absorbing the shock of the identification, relayed another piece of the unfolding puzzle, one that had preceded the grim discovery. Sergeant, at 7:40 this morning, I was called to the spinning cycle laundromat in town. A report of a running vehicle with a frantic little dog. I found the car. It had been there all night. A quick registration check had confirmed the vehicle was registered to Agnes Abernathy. He'd gained entry into the car, finding Aggie's purse undisturbed on the front seat, containing currency, nothing rifled through. He'd even found wet clothing in a washing machine inside the laundromat, almost certainly belonging to Aggie. Where is she? He had asked himself then, his initial concern transforming into full-blown dread. Aggie, by all accounts, was devoted to her miniature poodle, Fifi. She would never, ever, leave her dog, especially for such an extended period, idling in a parked car overnight. Something he knew then was profoundly, terribly wrong. And now, all those unspoken fears had materialized into this grim tableau by Ravensleap Falls, confirming the worst. I don't think I can tell you much more until we conduct a full autopsy, Sergeant Dr. Vance informed me, her voice devoid of emotion, her eyes focused on the body. There are no apparent gunshot wounds, no visible stab wounds on the external body. However, she's been submerged in very cold water for hours, which has a tendency to close and conceal openings in the skin, or at least minimize obvious bruising. We're only looking at what we can visibly discern here. Method of death is yet to be definitively determined, but the distinct ligature marks on her wrists, matching the duct tape found nearby, are clear. There's obvious perimortem binding. The peaceful facade of Blackwood Creek had been savagely ripped away. Our small town would never be the same. Chapter 2. The Widening Circle. The first painful task after Agnes Abernathy's identification was always the death notification. It was a solemn, harrowing duty that never got easier. I knew both of Aggie's daughters, Abigail and Iris, from town, having seen them grow up in our tight-knit community. This was more than just a duty. It was a deeply emotional and personal wrench. Delivering news that their beloved mother had been found murdered, treated with such brutal disregard, was a moment that seared itself into my memory, a grim etching on the soul. I met them at Abigail's house, a small bungalow on the outskirts of town. Their faces, initially a mask of anxiety and hope, dissolved into heart-wrenching grief as I spoke the terrible words. "I just don't understand why anyone would do this to her," Abigail sobbed, her voice thick with pain and confusion, her hands clutching a worn photograph of her mother. Iris echoed her sister's anguish, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't believe it, Miles. And especially the way they found her, just the way she was treated. It was awful, awful. The indignity, the callousness of the act, seemed to compound their sorrow. In the days that followed, I spoke to dozens of Aggie's friends, neighbors, and colleagues, meticulously building a comprehensive picture of the victim's life. My aim was to unearth any enemies, any shadows in her seemingly bright and open existence. Each person offered the same, unwavering refrain. Aggie was a sweet, lovely, wonderful, warm, and loving person. Her generosity was legendary, her empathy profound. She would give you the most amazing hugs you could possibly imagine. One close friend recounted, tears welling in her eyes. Your whole world felt safe. When Aggie hugged you, she just radiated kindness. Aggie was employed as a home health aide, working for a local agency that served Blackwood Creek and the surrounding towns. She was, in essence, a professional caregiver, a person whose life was fundamentally dedicated to doing something for someone else, always putting herself aside for others. You don't find people like that anymore, another friend sighed, shaking her head. You just don't. She was one in a million. Who could possibly do this to such a woman? That chilling question became my driving obsession, echoing in my mind as I sifted through the innocuous details of her life. I was charged, by my oath, and by the unspoken pleas of the community, with finding the answer. Sergeant Sterling, did she have a boyfriend? Was she dating anybody? Something we should know about? Officer Chun, his initial shock slowly giving way to determined professionalism, asked during a case conference. She's been seeing a guy named Owen Davies. One friend had reluctantly revealed, hesitantly, said they had gone out on a date or two. He seemed quite smitten with her. Owen Davies. He immediately became our first natural person of interest. We brought him into the station for an interview, and he came in willingly, though clearly shaken and profoundly saddened by the news of Aggie's death. He was a soft-spoken, unassuming man, his grief appearing genuine. "How long have you and Aggie been seeing each other, Mr. Davies?" I began, keeping my voice neutral, observing his reactions closely. "We just started to get to know each other, Sergeant," he explained, his voice gentle, tinged with regret. "Mr. Davies, you may not see it this way," I said, laying out the uncomfortable truth of our methodology. "But as a homicide detective, I have to consider everyone close to the victim as a potential suspect until proven otherwise. I need to know your movements during the crucial time frame of the murder. Where were you on the night of May 31st, leading into the early morning of June 1st? Mark immediately provided a clear, almost foolproof alibi. "I was away for a few days, at the New England Regional Bowling Tournament, over in Springfield." This wasn't just a simple statement. He provided names, contact numbers, and even photographs. Crucially, several of the participants at the tournament were off-duty officers from various departments, some even from our own, participating in the same league. As we continued to canvass Aggie's social circle, one of her former neighbors approached Officer Chun, relaying a disturbing detail. "Did anybody tell you guys about the guy who was spying on Aggie?" she whispered, glancing nervously around the precinct lobby. "Interesting. Very interesting." This was a new, potentially promising lead. Aggie, it turned out. These unsettling occurrences made her profoundly uncomfortable, to the point where she was actively looking for another apartment. Mr. Peeping Tom, someone of interest. Finally, this might have some promise. My instincts, honed by years of seeing how seemingly minor acts could escalate, quicken. Sexual deviancy, even low-level voyeurism, could be a precursor to something far darker. I knew that often, predators tested boundaries, escalating their behavior when unchecked. We immediately dispatched a team back to Aggie's apartment building, a modest, red-brick, low-rise complex on Willow Street, just off Main. We began speaking to all the residents, seeking confirmation of the Peeping Tom rumor. "Did you, by chance, ever hear anything about someone spying on Aggie? Or looking through her windows? Anything unusual?" I asked, showing them a photo of Aggie. None of the residents seemed to have any knowledge of a Peeping Tom looking in any window, until we encountered a woman in a ground-floor apartment, her face tight with defensiveness. That was my son, Finn Carter, but it was all just a big misunderstanding. She, of course, fiercely denied that her son could have any involvement or responsibility in doing anything harmful to Aggie. "Finn's a good boy," she insisted, her gaze unwavering. We weren't swayed by a mother's loyal, but ultimately transparent, denial. "Would it be possible for us to speak with Finn, ma'am?" I asked, my voice calm but firm. "Sure can," she replied, a faint note of triumph in her voice. "Just go down to the county jail where your people locked him up." A quick check of local records confirmed her claim. Finn Carter, we quickly ascertained, was indeed a local petty criminal, currently locked up, serving a short sentence for a small-time theft conviction that dated back several weeks, encompassing the time of Aggie's murder. He couldn't have been involved. Another promising lead that dissolved into a dead end, adding to the mounting frustration. The next day, Dr. Vance performed the full autopsy on Aggie's body, her methodical precision offering a grim solace in its search for truth. Her findings confirmed our initial observations from the creek, and then added horrifying, meticulous detail to B's last moments. The cause of death was determined to be manual strangulation, Dr. Vance stated, her voice stark, devoid of emotion, yet carrying the weight of ultimate finality. The frigid water had indeed, as she predicted, initially concealed the subtle bruises on Aggie's neck, only to be revealed by the careful examination. There were also some clear signs of trauma in certain areas consistent with sexual assault, in addition to extensive bruising indicative of blunt force trauma to the head and face. Aggie, this kind, gentle woman, had endured a truly brutal and terrifying death, experiencing both sexual violence and a beating before being offering the first tangible, actionable leads to the primary crime scene. "Look closely at her eyes, David," Dr. Vance directed, holding a powerful magnifying glass to Aggie's left eye. There is a blue-tinted soft contact lens, still perfectly in place in her left eye, but there is no contact lens in the right eye. It's missing. Then, as Dr. Vance meticulously combed through Aggie's short, silver hair, her instrument found a small, metallic glint. She carefully plucked it out with tweezers, dropping it onto a sterile cloth. only the backing. So the earring itself is missing. My mind raced, connecting the dots. A missing blue contact lens, a missing gold earring. These were more than just details. They were fragments of the actual crime scene, microscopic breadcrumbs from the moments of struggle. If we could find the missing earring, or that unique blue-tinted contact lens, it would, with almost mathematical certainty, lead us directly to the precise location where Aggie Callahan met her horrific end. The actual location of the murder, rather than just the dump site. "Thank you very much, Dr. Vance," I said, a renewed sense of purpose invigorating me, chasing away the fatigue. "If you find anything else, please let me know immediately." The question continued to hang heavy in the air, echoing across our small, once peaceful town. Who could do this? Who could do such a horrific thing to Agnes Abernathy? Why would anyone perpetrate such an act of unspeakable evil against such a truly kind, gentle soul, a person renowned for her beautiful spirit? It was a crime that utterly shocked the conscience of Blackwood Creek, transforming it overnight from a sleepy bedroom community into a town gripped by pervasive fear. The chilling realization that a remorseless murderer was at large, walking amongst them. The old was muttered endlessly on every street corner, in every diner. Things like that don't happen here. But unfortunately, things like that do happen in small towns. Beneath the veneer of idyllic charm, there are good people who lead their normal lives. But they're also monsters. And once in a while, under the wrong circumstances, they show themselves, tearing apart the illusion of safety. Aggie's murder ripped through the heart of Blackwood Creek, rocking it to its very core. The community, horrified, traumatized, rallied in its grief and outrage. The tip line flowed with an astronomical amount of information, a continuous deluge of calls from concerned residents. Every single person had a tidbit, a suspicion, a memory they believed might help us. It was a testament to how deeply Aggie had touched their lives. As I meticulously sifted through these anonymous tips, a woman had called, reporting that she was taking her niece to the early morning bus stop, around 5:30 a.m. As they passed the bridge over Raven's Leap Falls, she clearly saw a car parked directly on the bridge itself. The car, she described, was a boxy-style, blue or greenish sedan vehicle. It was completely out of the ordinary for any vehicle, let alone one of that description, to be parked there at that isolated hour. Well, why is it parked there? I pondered, a grim, undeniable answer already forming in my mind. Perhaps, just perhaps, it was parked there because its occupant was in the agonizing. I made a critical mental note. This car, if found, could be another vital piece of evidence, not of the murder itself, but of its terrible aftermath. I continued to reach out, to contact people who knew Aggie. Eventually, we discovered a long-time acquaintance, Harold Jameson. They had, it turned out, maintained an on-again, off-again relationship for years, a complicated dance of affection. This was someone who definitely needed to be intensely drilled down upon. "Thank you for agreeing to meet with me, Mr. Jameson," I began, seating him in a small, windowless interview room at the station. We asked him about their relationship, what the precise status of it was at the time of Aggie's death. He explained that he hadn't spoken with or seen Aggie for about 3 weeks prior to the murder, after a particularly bad argument. Leading into the early morning of June 1st, I probed, my voice even, unrevealing. Harold then gave us a very troubling account of his movements, a story so bizarre, it almost defied belief. "Well, actually, Sergeant, I was over by the spinning cycle laundromat that night," he said, his voice hesitant. My heart leaped. The laundromat, the very place where Aggie's car was found idling, her dog barking frantically inside. "You were—" "Yeah," he continued, nervously fidgeting with his hands. "The night of the 31st, I was out for a bit, driving around, and I happened to drive by the laundromat. I saw Aggie's car, that old Volvo, and it was running right there in front of the place. We'd kind of left things on a bad note a few weeks back. You know, a stupid fight, and I wanted to try and set things right with her. Apologize maybe. So I waited on her." He described parking in a lot next door for a considerable period of time, but he never saw her come out to the car. Eventually, he walked around, checked inside the laundromat, but didn't find her anywhere. "So you didn't think anything was particularly odd about this, Mr. Jameson?" I asked, my voice rising slightly in incredulity. "An idling car, at that hour, with her dog inside, and she was nowhere to be found. And you didn't think to report any of this?" I didn't know it was bad. Sergeant, he stammered, looking genuinely distraught. I just didn't think anything about it at the time. I thought maybe she'd gone off with a friend or something. You know, she's an adult. I figured she could take care of herself. I didn't think anything about it. You didn't think about it. This was, without a doubt, one of the worst, most unbelievable stories I'd ever heard. Was it that bad of a lie? Carefully constructed to deflect suspicion? Or was he simply, genuinely, a profoundly naive and oblivious blockhead? So utterly dense, he truly wouldn't think anything was amiss about an idling car, a frantically barking dog, and a woman who couldn't be found for hours in a town as small and tightly knit as Blackwood Creek. Look, Sergeant, I would never, ever hurt Aggie, Harold insisted, tears welling in his eyes. I loved her. He seemed visibly distraught about her death. He was cooperative, even consenting immediately to a thorough search of his car. No signs of struggle, no evidence of any kind was found inside. Everything about Harold Jameson checked out, except for the world's most suspiciously ignorant alibi. Not yet. His profound lack of concern was almost as troubling as outright hostility. Chapter 3. The Scratched Face of a Killer. Sergeant Elena Reyes and I were deep in discussion, dissecting the Harold Jameson interview, analyzing the puzzling discrepancies, when the phone on my desk rang, piercing the quiet of my office. It was Chief Williams. His voice clipped, laced with undisguised urgency. Miles, I just received a frantic call from a witness, and tell them not to touch anything. I'll be right down, I replied, already halfway out of my chair, my heart hammered with a renewed sense of purpose. This was it. A direct, undeniable link to Agnes Abernathy's last known whereabouts, to the scene of her actual murder. My unmarked patrol car, siren wailing through the winding streets, cut through the quiet hum of Blackwood Creek. I arrived at the Spinning Cycle Laundromat building, a two-story structure with apartments on the second and third floors, currently undergoing renovations. The air was thick with the scent of fresh-cut wood and plastered dust. A construction foreman, Mr. Kenneth Shaw, a burly man with sawdust clinging to his work clothes, met me at the main entrance, his face pale and agitated. Sergeant Sterling, thank God you're here, Shaw stammered, guiding me quickly upstairs. He recounted how one of his carpenters, Mr. Carl Edwards, had been working on the third-floor apartment unit. As Carl was cutting some planks of unfinished pine, he'd noticed something small and metallic, gleaming faintly outside of the sawdust. An earring. The news of Aggie's brutal murder had, by now, traveled like wildfire through our small town, infiltrating every conversation, every household. Carl had immediately known that this shiny object, found here, had to be connected. He'd carefully secured the area and called the chief directly. The State Police Major Crime Squad was immediately dispatched to the location. They meticulously began their scene investigation, processing every inch of the unfinished apartment. Every tool, every bag of plaster, every pile of sawdust was carefully catalogued and examined. And then, astonishingly, one of the sharp-eyed crime scene detectives made a second, equally critical discovery. Tucked into a tiny crevice in the worn hardwood floor, almost deliberately concealed beneath a small pile of fresh wood shavings, was a small, blue-tinted contact lens. It was the missing blue contact lens from the right eye of Beatrice Callahanaghy. There was no longer any question in anyone's mind. This was the exact location where Aggie met her horrific death. This was the scene of the struggle, the brutal violence. The very place where the last agonizing moments of her life played out. The finding of the primary crime scene provided critical context to our investigation. It indicated to us that the perpetrator had to be somebody with a high degree of familiarity, inherent access, and fundamental comfort with the apartment building. Someone who could easily navigate the construction chaos without raising suspicion. Someone who had keys. Someone who belonged. The carpenter, Mr. Edwards, tells me only 2 people have a key to this particular apartment door. Officer Chun informed me, reviewing the preliminary scene report. Well, there's Victor Hayes, the guy that owns the place. We quickly, fortunately, were able to rule Victor Hayes out. He had a meticulously documented, ironclad alibi, proving he was out of state, visiting family in Portland, at the precise time of the murder. That left Arthur Finch. Arthur Finch, a name that, while new to our specific murder investigation, was vaguely familiar. I had heard it around town, but didn't know him personally. We were not that familiar with Arthur personally. No, I'd later recall, but he was from a local family, known in the community, and his employment at the building, his ready access, his inherent familiarity with its nooks and crannies. He clearly had to be considered our prime suspect, the kind of man who could come and go without notice. Back at the station, a rapid background check on Arthur Finch brought a chilling jolt of recognition. Chief Williams was in my office as I reviewed the file, his expression growing grimmer with each line I read. "Chief, you're not going to believe what I found on this Finch suspect." Arthur Finch wasn't just a maintenance man. He had a prior conviction for stranger abduction and sexual assault dating back to the late 1970s. And, horrifyingly, he had only recently been released from jail after serving a significant sentence, having just come off parole in the past year. This was a massive, seismic shift in the investigation. A predator, previously incarcerated, now walking free amongst us, with a history of sexual violence and abduction. My mind, accustomed to the brutal patterns of predatory behavior, recoiled in cold recognition. He'd been caught once. How many times had he not been caught? This was no longer just a person of interest. This was a likely monster, unleashed, potentially seeking a new victim. I knew I needed to talk to him, immediately. Arthur Finch came in willingly, ostensibly unfazed by the police presence. He was a man in his late 40s, slightly built, with nervous eyes that darted constantly. As he sat down in the sterile interview room, I noticed a distinct, jagged scratch over his nose, extending from one eyebrow to the other. It looked fresh, raw, a nasty mark, one that hinted at a violent struggle. "Mr. Finch," I began, my voice steady, professional, but my eyes fixed on the wound. "That's a nasty mark you got there. How'd that happen? Looks quite deep." I got it at work, Sergeant," he stammered, his gaze darting away from mine, avoiding direct eye contact. "Something happened with some of the lumber." "Yeah, just clumsy." The explanation felt weak, rehearsed, entirely unconvincing, and it was instantly, powerfully suspicious. Finch was intensely sketchy, very nervous about the fact that we were even approaching him, his body language radiating discomfort. But there was something deeper, more insidious than mere nervousness, a coldness behind his eyes, a flicker of suppressed malevolence, a predatory quality that sent a prickle down my spine. This, I thought with a grim certainty, this could be our player. This could be the killer. "Mr. Finch, I wanted to ask you about your prior conviction," I probed, cutting directly to the core of his past. He explained his prior conviction as a misunderstanding, a hazy, self-serving tale of being drunk, making bad choices, and encountering a woman. "Things went wrong, Sergeant," he claimed, carefully selecting his words. He also admitted to abusing drugs and alcohol together at one time in his life, but insisted he doesn't do drugs anymore, still occasionally drinks. "But I got my life together." He presented himself as a reformed man. "Mr. Finch, did you know Agnes Trudy, as many called her?" Blackwood Creek was not a big town. Aggie had lived just up the road from this very building, a well-known figure. There had to have been some passing acquaintanceship, at the very least. This was a definite lie, an immediate red flag. "Can you tell me where you were the night of May 31st? I asked, challenging his already shaky, convenient alibi. He claimed his activities included working in the building during the day, performing maintenance tasks, then going to the Ricci Brothers pizza place across the street to unwind, before finally going home to his apartment and going to bed. His alibi was incredibly thin. He claimed to have spent the latter half of the evening entirely alone, save for his brief stop at the pizza parlor. "Do you drive a car, Mr. Finch?" I asked, moving to a critical logistical point. "I haven't driven a car in a while, Sergeant," he claimed, stating his driver's license was under suspension due to prior duty. If he was truthful about not having a car, it would have been incredibly difficult, almost impossible, for him to dispose of a human body in a remote area like Raven's Leap Falls. This created a new problem for our theory. As the interview continued, and we pressed him further, his composure, however fragile, finally broke. His eyes hardened, and he pushed back from the table. "I do not want to participate in this interview anymore," he stated, his voice sharp, rising slightly with defiance. "I'm done answering your questions." Arthur Finch was still our prime suspect, a very strong one. But despite all the damning circumstantial evidence, the proximity to the crime scene, his ready access, the horrific prior conviction, the physical scratches, the suspicious demeanor, the mounting stack of lies, it didn't yet rise to the level of having probable cause for an arrest. We had to let him go. The frustration gnawed at me, a bitter taste in my mouth. But before he left, I noticed he'd been smoking nervously throughout the interview, flicking ash into a disposable ashtray provided by Officer Chun. I want to get Officer Chun from the evidence in here, I instructed Sergeant Reyes. I want to meticulously keep every one of those cigarette butts he smoked and secure them as evidence for possible use in the future. It was 1998. DNA evidence was not yet widely known, nor was it easily accessible or even broadly accepted in many courtrooms. But I was a smart man, keenly aware of the relentless march of scientific advancement. I had a premonition, just might speak a powerful, undeniable truth. Arthur Finch had presented himself as our prime suspect. This case wasn't over. It was merely on pause. Chapter 4. The first crucial step in looking into Arthur Finch very carefully was to expose his lies. My methodical approach always sought out inconsistencies, the telltale signs of a fabricated narrative. I began by systematically questioning the regulars at the spinning cycle, laundromat, and the other residents in Aggie's apartment building. I was wondering if any of you knew anyone by the name of Arthur Finch. The responses came almost immediately, with startling consistency and a palpable undercurrent of unspoken knowledge. Yeah, I sure did. One elderly woman stated, her eyes narrowing. Which one do you know about him? Oh, everyone here knows Arthur. I found, almost at once, that Finch had lied directly to me. All of them. A parade of ordinary citizens corroborated. Finch knew Aggie. They'd seen him talk to her on many occasions, discussing repairs, or simply exchanging pleasantries common in a small town. We even had witnesses who specifically told us that he had prior conversations with her. In a small town like Blackwood Creek, people talked, and everybody, it seemed, knew everyone's business. Aggie, it turned out, seeking his advice or information on available units. Yet, Finch, to my face, had emphatically denied even knowing who the victim was. Anytime you interview somebody, you're looking for the first lie, because if you lie to me, I'm talking to the right person. Finch's lies were stacking up, forming a precarious, by Finch's own admission in our first interview, on the evening of May 31st, and had consumed a few beers. My next immediate stop was the pizza place, to see what brothers Vincenzo and Carlo Ricci had to say about their interaction with Mr. Finch that evening. How's it going, Vincenzo? Hey, detective, how's it going? Come on in. We interviewed both brothers, Vincenzo and Carlo Ricci, who owned the Cheesy Corner. I later recounted to Sergeant Reyes. They both knew the maintenance guy, Arthur Finch. He came across as actually a really nice guy. They said, quite friendly, a regular. He would come in quite frequently, usually to unwind after his shift. Was he here on the 31st? I asked. Oh yeah, he was here. Detective Vincenzo confirmed, wiping flour from his apron. He was different. The biggest thing I remember were his eyes. They were just so red, so glossy. He looked absolutely miserable. Both brothers described him as being profoundly depressed and definitely under the influence of alcohol, if not something stronger. Hey Arthur, you doing okay? You seem a little upset, buddy? Carlo had asked him, concern evident in his voice. Apparently, the woman that he was with, Clara, he claimed to have caught her with another man. He said he simply could not handle that, and he had gotten really, really upset. He claimed to have been drinking steadily since then, trying to drown his sorrows. Carlo's sister, Maria, who also worked behind the counter, a kind-hearted woman, even sat down with him for a moment, trying to offer some comfort. Finch, desperate for companionship or distraction, had even brazenly asked her to go to the local bowling alley down the street with him. Come on, Maria, you can come for a little while, right? Just to talk. Maria, visibly uncomfortable, had politely declined, stating they were about to close up shop, and she needed to help her brother. It had been, both brothers confirmed, a very uncomfortable scene. I knew there was definitely something wrong with him that night, Vincenzo stated, a grim look on his face. I was now fully aware that Arthur Finch had told me not one, but two major demonstrable lies. First, his categorical denial that he didn't know Aggie Abernathy. Second, his insistent claim that he had given up drugs and alcohol and was a changed person, rehabilitated from his past vices. These lies painted a chilling picture of a man desperate to conceal his true nature, a man teetering on the edge of a violent unraveling. So I brought Finch back in for a second interview. ready to confront him with the overwhelming accumulating evidence of his deceit. The mask he had so carefully constructed was about to be ripped away. "Arthur, we know you knew Aggie Abernathy. They saw you interact. They saw you talk to her." "No, no," he insisted again, stubbornly, vehemently, clinging to the initial lie, even when faced with overwhelming evidence. At that point, he still, incredibly, claimed he did not know Aggie, but his resolve was clearly weakening. He did, however, finally admit to having fallen off the wagon, conceding that he had indeed been drinking heavily. This, he maintained, was solely because he was so distraught over his cheating ex-girlfriend. It was an excuse, a partial truth intended to camouflage a deeper, more monstrous one. "What's your girlfriend's name, Arthur?" I pressed, shifting the focus abruptly, looking for any other points of leverage, any other threads to pull. "Clara." "Clara what?" Finch was emotional, distraught, putting on a whole scene, his shoulders slumping, his voice trembling. He acted as if he couldn't believe that he was being blamed for this heinous crime, for Aggie's murder. "I'm done with all this," he protested, attempting to be dismissive, agitated. "You're just blaming me for things I didn't do." At that point, we still didn't have sufficient physical evidence directly linking him to the murder for an immediate arrest. But Mr. Finch, with every word, every lie, every desperate deflection, was digging his own grave deeper. Crucially, the most important piece of information to emerge from this second interview, amidst his dramatic performance, was that he was finally able to obtain the full name of this girlfriend, Clara Jensen. This was, according to Finch, the cheating ex-girlfriend that had driven him to drink and drugs, who had sent him spiraling into this dark night of emotional distress. That was a truly significant lead. We immediately went out and interviewed Clara Jensen. She was a woman in her late 30s, looking exhausted and weary, but determined to speak her truth, painting a chilling, horrifyingly accurate picture of Finch's true character, far from the innocent, heartbroken victim he portrayed himself to be. "I don't even know where to begin with that man. Detective," she began, shaking her head. "He's out of control, an absolute menace when he drinks." Her story was damning. Finch had indeed been drinking heavily and using drugs again recently. She had, as a result, effectively thrown him out of her place, desperate to escape his spiraling rage. I now had clear, cunning fabrication. But then, at the very end of her detailed statement, Clara delivered a final, crucial bombshell, a piece of information that made my heart leap in my chest. When I finally threw Arthur out of my place, he didn't just leave. It was a distinctive, boxy-style sedan that was a peculiar shade of faded blue-green in color. Really? My mind immediately flashed back to that anonymous tip I had received just days after Aggie's body was discovered. Parked on the bridge directly over Ravensleep Falls, at an unusual hour. The car. That was important. I knew instantly, my mind racing, connecting the disparate threads. That was a very strong, undeniable piece of the investigation at that point. Another thick, rusty nail hammered directly into Mr. Finch's coffin. I thanked Clara Jensen for her words, her courage, and her critical information. The pieces of the puzzle were finally, sickeningly, slotting into place. Now, I faced the urgent, final task of finding that car. And remarkably, almost as if drawn by the gravitational pull of justice, the car found us. A guy named Julian Cross called the police station. "How are you doing, Mr. Cross? I hear you have something that might interest me." Julian explained that he had, indeed, a blue-green vintage Volvo S70 sedan, matching Clara's description, parked prominently in his yard. He recounted how Finch had called him, frantic, asking him to take the car up to a remote, rarely used logging road north of town and to park it in a very specific, isolated spot, obscured from view. But Julian, uneasy about Finch's recent behavior and deeply unsettled by the omnipresent news of Aggie Abernathy's brutal murder, had just had a profoundly bad feeling about it. His conscience, combined with a primal fear of being implicated, had driven him to a crucial decision. He decided, instead of hiding it, to bring the car directly to the police station. It's another big gotcha moment in the case, I reflected later, the pieces of evidence finally overwhelming. We strongly suspected that this specific car had been used in the transportation of Aggie's deceased body to Ravensleep Falls. We immediately, unequivocally, seized the vehicle. We hoped, desperately, to find some biological trace evidence in that car. I immediately called in the state police CSI tech team, instructing them to deploy every resource available. They meticulously went over the car, inch by painstaking inch. After hours of careful work, they found what they believed to be a faint body fluid stain on the passenger seat, almost imperceptible to the naked eye. A dark smear barely visible against the faded upholstery. They carefully removed that section of the seat cover and sealed it for transport to the state laboratory for analysis. Waiting for the results from the forensic lab was a long, painstaking process. Each day stretched into an eternity of frustration and agonizing anticipation. They had to do things very meticulously to ensure chain of custody and scientific rigor, and that simply took time. Weeks crawled by, each passing day, a test of patience. Each call to the lab met with the same answer. Still processing, Sergeant. Yet insistent inquiries. The results came in. Sergeant Sterling, the lab technician's voice, was, as ever, calm, professional, yet carrying a faint note of caution. The news was a mixed bag, offering both a crucial link and a frustrating limitation. The samples from the car definitively matched Aggie Abernathy's bodily fluids. It unequivocally tied her, and therefore her murderer, to this specific car, confirming its use as the method of transportation for her remains to Raven's Leap Falls. Another vital, irrefutable link in the chain of evidence. But then, the disheartening news. No discernible genetic material from Arthur Finch was found within the body fluid stains that could be reliably sampled and profiled. The State Police Laboratory, using the forensic capabilities available in 1998, claimed they were unable to get any conclusive DNA readings or what they called amplification from the minuscule, degraded material they had. We had hoped, desperately, for biological evidence directly connecting Finch and Aggie, in an undeniable, provable sense. And, devastatingly, we didn't get that. We could say that Finch had undisputed access to the car, and that Aggie's bodily fluids were undeniably in it. But, critically, we did not have any scientific evidence proving that Finch himself was the one driving the car, or that he was in it with her during the murder. I was left with a powerful, burning conviction. I was profoundly convinced that Arthur Finch was Aggie Abernathy's rapist and murderer. But without that direct DNA link, I was unable to prove this beyond a reasonable doubt in a courtroom. We would only get one shot at this. If a jury threw it out, if they returned a not guilty verdict, we could never come back at him. All the overwhelming circumstantial evidence, the accumulating lies, the unparalleled access, the horrific prior conviction for sexual assault and abduction, the physical scratches on his face, the suspicious demeanor, the car linked directly to the victim, all pointed inexorably to him. But without that final, clinching, scientific piece of direct evidence, to secure an arrest and a subsequent conviction that would withstand a vigorous defense. I waited. Chapter 5. Justice delayed. The waiting was excruciating. But patience, a grim necessity in the desolate world of cold cases, was something I had cultivated over years, something I now possessed, something I needed to exercise. I knew, with a gut certainty, that I couldn't prosecute Arthur Finch then and there. Not yet. Not in 1998. The forensic science wasn't ready for him. I had to wait for some other method, some future scientific advancement, to unequivocally tie Mr. Finch to this horrific crime. The law demanded irrefutable proof. The frustration of living with an unsolved case, a brutal murder whose perpetrator I knew yet couldn't fully bring to justice, was a heavy burden to deal with day in and day out. It was even more difficult in a small town like Blackwood Creek, where everyone knew me. They saw me, Detective Sergeant Miles Corbin, the lead investigator, as the stumbling block between justice and the brutal, senseless death of a beloved community member. You see these people at church, in the grocery store, at every town meeting, at every turn, and you see the look they give you, the look of disappointment, the look of blame, the look of guilt, the unspoken accusation that you, their local lawman, had somehow failed them. It was particularly difficult to face B's daughters, Abigail and Iris. Their grief remained raw, their questions constant, their eyes pleading for answers I couldn't yet give them. There were so many crucial investigative details I couldn't tell them, elements of Finch's lies and Clara Jensen's story that had to remain confidential, for the ultimate integrity of a future prosecution. Why would somebody have done that? How could you? How could you do something like that? Their voices, thick with pain, still echoed in my memory. We heard the scuttlebutt. But I, Sergeant Sterling, did not quit. We just kept meticulously piling up all the evidence that we could, preserving it, cataloging it, waiting for its day. But the more time that passed, the stronger the grim reality became. I was still absent some vital linking pieces, some technological breakthrough, to bring this whole thing together and secure an ironclad conviction. The initial scientific limitations were a stark barrier. I explored every avenue, every possibility, leaving no stone unturned in my relentless pursuit. At one point, we found some unique wood shavings from Clara Jensen's vintage Volvo IS-70, Carthaveri Carfinch driven. These shavings, distinct and unusual, I believed might be a potential answer to my prayers, a novel piece of trace evidence. I approached our state lab director, Dr. Elena Vargas, with the idea. Sergeant Sterling came to me, Dr. Vargas would recall, and was discussing the wood that was found in the car. He wanted somebody, an expert, to compare it to the wood at what we believed to be the primary crime scene in the apartment above, the spinning cycle laundromat. I found out the FBI has a wood expert, Dr. Vargas stated, her tone one of mild amusement, but also professional respect for my tenacity. A wood expert, I retorted, genuinely incredulous. What do you mean? There's a professor of wood. Is that even a real thing? But if there was an expert, anywhere in the country, who could help, I would use them. I had to. We secured funding and authorization, and brought in experts in forensic wood evidence, consultants from outside the state lab, seasoned botanists. They meticulously analyzed the samples. Their determination, after painstaking microscopic and chemical analysis, was detailed and compelling. Originated from the specific construction materials at the apartment building above the laundromat, proving they were transferred from the primary crime scene into the car, and subsequently could have been transferred to the secondary dump site at Raven's Leap Falls. It was innovative, cutting-edge trace evidence for 1998, pushing the boundaries of forensic science. But it was, in a sense, what would later be viewed as junk science, relative to what the future would hold. Everyone, even then, was beginning to talk about DNA. Everyone wanted that sure hit, the ceiling-high probability numbers that indisputable DNA evidence could provide. So the prosecutor, after reviewing the detailed, technical report, looked at me, a slight frown of polite skepticism on his face, and said, "Okay, David, you've got wood chips. That's good. Thank you for your It was a polite dismissal, an acknowledgement of my dedication, but a clear sign that my evidence, however novel, was not quite the smoking gun he needed for a slam-dunk murder conviction against a high-risk defendant. But if you look at where my mind was going on this, you couldn't just see that I wasn't giving up. Emails, letters, pushing the envelope, insisting on retesting in new angles. Hey, how about this? How about this? Let's try this. What new methods are emerging? We had to wait for DNA science to move forward, to evolve into a far more powerful and pervasive investigative tool. We had to wait for some other irrefutable method to unequivocally tie Mr. Finch to this crime. And so, despite my personal conviction and mounting circumstantial evidence, the matter eventually, agonizingly, went cold. It stayed cold for a long, unimaginable time. For 16 years, it stayed cold until the year 2013. 16 long, silent years had passed since the brutal murder of Agnes Abernathy. 16 years of her daughters living with questions, of the community's lingering unease, and of my own quiet, persistent frustration. By 2013, I was nearing the twilight of my career, yet Aggie's file remained a heavy burden in my consciousness. But this particular cold case, like so many others across the nation, finally came down to the unwavering march of science. Technology had advanced in a rapid, almost unimaginable way since 1998, now staffed by a new generation of dedicated, technologically savvy investigators. Finally reopened Aggie Abernathy's file, breathing new life into the old evidence. The original physical evidence minute section of seat cover from Clara Jensen's Volvo, meticulously preserved by my foresight, carefully sealed away, was finally brought out of storage for re-examination. The lab, now equipped with state-of-the-art forensic capabilities, far beyond what existed in 1998, was able to do what was once impossible: identify viable DNA in the minute biological material that had been in Clara Peterson's car. They were able to extract and amplify minuscule traces of semen from the nearly invisible body fluid stains on the seat cover. Degraded samples that the earlier methods simply couldn't detect or amplify. And then, in a dramatic, long-awaited breakthrough, using that genetic profile, they compared it to the cigarette butts that I to keep when I first talked to Arthur Finch back in 1998, preserving them against all odds. And there it was. A direct, unequivocal match. There were strong, astronomically high probability matches from the DNA on the cigarette butts, unequivocally linking Arthur Finch to the genetic material found in Clara's car, which in turn was linked to Aggie Abernathy. We had them at this point. Sergeant Sterling, the lead cold case detective, a young woman named Amelia Reyes, the daughter of my former patrol sergeant Elena Reyes, informed me over the phone, her voice brimming with a triumph I had dreamed of for years. The numbers are so astronomically high, miles through the ceiling, that we had them. There's no question. It's him. The arrest warrant was immediately signed, expedited by the overwhelming, irrefutable evidence. Arthur Finch had a new address. We had known, through my diligence and the continuous, low-level monitoring I had maintained over the years, that Finch had eventually relocated and was residing in a quiet town in coastal South Carolina. A joint team of investigators from the state's attorney's cold case unit, along with federal assistance, traveled south and arrested him without incident. He was transported back north, up to Connecticut, brought back to the very state where he had committed his heinous crime. They attempted an interview. He wouldn't say a word, his face a stone mask of defiance, even when presented with the cold, hard, irrefutable evidence. He remained a silent, stubborn, cold figure, attempting to cling to the last vestiges of his control. But his silence no longer mattered. The evidence spoke for him. The likelihood was now great, virtually certain, that the crime occurred in the following. High on whatever he had been consuming, fueled by the corrosive mixture of alcohol and anger after being turned down and rejected by Maria, and freshly infuriated by his cheating girlfriend, Clara. He hated the world, and most likely, he particularly hated women at that moment, seeking an outlet for his simmering rage. And then, in a horrifying twist of fate, he saw Agnes Abernathy. Somebody he knew, someone familiar, kind, One must keep in mind that sexual assault is not, fundamentally, a crime of sexual gratification. It's a crime of power, of control, often deeply rooted in the perpetrator's profound misogyny, a heinous act of the punishment and degradation of women. And he desperately needed to hurt someone, to reassert a twisted sense of control. And he selected Bacalahan, a woman of warmth and kindness, precisely because of her gentle nature, a vulnerable target for his monstrous impulses. Hey, Aggie. The one I was telling you about for possibly relocating. Did you want to come up and check it out real quick? Oh, Arthur, I probably shouldn't. I've got Fifi, my dog, in the car, in my laundry. Come on, it'll be fast. Then you can go. Won't take long at all. Just upstairs. He lured her up into that empty, isolated apartment unit, the very space that would become the primary crime scene. Aggie, innocent, unsuspecting, trusting in the familiarity of her building's maintenance man, went with him. She didn't feel threatened by him. She had no idea she was placing herself in that type of grave, mortal danger. Once they got up into the apartment, the door closed, and the monster inside Arthur Finch emerged. He attacked her brutally. He raped her. He manually strangled her, savagely taking her life. Then, with chilling premeditation, he bound her lifeless body with duct tape and placed her in the backseat of Clara's Volvo, her own car still idling outside the laundromat. He drove her to the secluded Raven's Leap Falls in the early hours of the morning, the blue-green sedan a ghostly, boxy shape in the dim pre-dawn light. There, with cold contempt, he dragged her body from the car and then threw her into the stream, discarding her like garbage, a final act of desecration. He then went on about his miserable life, convinced he had outwitted justice, until the relentless march of science and the unwavering dedication of detectives finally caught up to him. Arthur Finch was formally charged with murder and presented before a judge at Superior Court in Middletown, Connecticut. I was there, sitting in the courtroom, watching him. I was shocked, truly shocked, at his appearance. The wiry, nervous man I remembered from 1998 was gone, replaced by a husk of a man. He was morbidly obese, his body frail and failing, slumped in a wheelchair, connected to a nasal cannula, providing oxygen. You know, karma comes back. It does. The case proceeded through its arduous prosecution phase, the weight of the new DNA evidence Finally, in 2016, facing an insurmountable mountain of forensic proof and the prospect of a length, he was sentenced to the rest of his natural life in prison. Given his precarious physical condition, his rapidly deteriorating health, he wasn't going to last that long in prison, but that's precisely where he went. He would not get out alive, no doubt. His freedom, finally and forever, was gone. Though still etched with the pain of decades, now bore a fragile sense of closure, of peace. I'm glad he's finally paying the price for what he did, Grace said outside the courtroom, her voice clear, firm, a profound strength emanating from her. Arthur did an awful lot of damage that night, to a lot of people, to B, to Aggie, to her family, to the entire town. Iris, still remembering her mother's unique warmth, added softly, her voice thick with emotion, someone who was so deeply loved, who was so incredibly kind to people, so caring. She's truly, truly missed. We had heard the whispers back in the day, but we knew, with quiet conviction, that we could do the case. I personally have no regrets as to how long this took. I carry a lot of frustration from the years of waiting, the quiet battles fought, but I also carry a profound sense of satisfaction. If I had not resolved this case to this day, I still would be working on it, because justice demanded it. And now, justice has been provided. He met his justice, and Agnes Abernathy, at long last, found her. The cold current of her murder finally found its justice. Part 2, The Ghost in the Machine. Chapter 6, Crimson Bay Morning. Still carried the echoes of past investigations, of lives irrevocably changed. The calendar read June 25, 2016, and I was nearing the end of my storied career with the Viridian Heights Police Department. The early morning fog, a common curtain along the Oregon coast. Today, however, that familiar fog did little to soothe the frayed nerves of Evelyn Albright. Evelyn, a woman in her late 30s, had been out since mid-morning with her two youngest, Clara and Leo. The cheerful insistence of her children for brightly colored toys. The mundane rhythm of consumerism was her reality. Her husband, Arthur Caldwell, was at home, ostensibly working on a project in the garage. They were just unloading the last of the shopping bags from the minivan into the kitchen, the flimsy plastic rustling, when the ordinary shattered with brutal abruptness. Heard at first a sound that, even now, years later, reverberated in her nightmares with chilling clarity. Clara, her spirited 7-year-old daughter, let out a piercing scream from deeper within the house, from the area of the garage entrance. "Mom, what is going on?" The pure, unadulterated terror in her child's voice froze Evelyn in her tracks, her muscles locking, his small face pale and twisted with an expression Eleanor had never seen, a blank, horrified stare. His tiny finger pointed, trembling, towards the hallway leading from the garage. "Mom, there's blood everywhere." His voice was a thin, reedy whisper, devoid of its usual playful cheer, stripped of all childish innocence. The groceries clattered to the floor, milk cartons splitting open, milk pooling white against the linoleum. Her mind reeled, grasping frantically for a rational explanation. An accident, a clumsy fall. But Leo's words, blood everywhere, the image clawed at her, raw and terrifying, painted in her imagination even before she saw it. She didn't dare go further inside. Her instinct, primal and absolute, was to protect her children, to shield them from whatever monstrous scene awaited them. She scrambled back out of the house, fumbling for her phone with trembling fingers, the cold plastic suddenly feeling alien, slippery, in her grasp. The chill of the coastal fog seemed to intensify, wrapping around her in a suffocating, almost predatory embrace. Dialing 911, her voice rose in a frantic, hysterical shriek. "What's the emergency, ma'am?" The dispatcher's calm/measured tones were a stark, unsettling contrast to her own escalating panic, her barely coherent terror. Arthur, is he alive?" The name of her husband, Arthur Caldwell, tore from her throat. His unwavering, if sometimes gruff affection, the constant hum of their complicated life. She couldn't process the sudden, terrifying vacuum his absence implied. Ma'am, I need you to calm down. Who is Arthur? Can you tell me what happened? The dispatcher patiently prompted, trying to pull coherence from chaos. My husband, he's hurt. There's so much blood. The dispatcher was trying to talk her through it, guiding her, but the words were a muffled jumble in her terror-stricken mind, a cacophony of fear and desperate plea. The officers are driving there as fast as they can. Okay, ma'am. Can you tell me what you see from where you are, from the street? I'm scared. What do I do? What do I do? Evelyn sank onto the porch steps, pulling her children close, shielding them with her own trembling body, her own heart-rending sobs mixing with Clara's silent tears. She was too consumed by her own unraveling horror to truly comprehend the full scope of what had befallen Arthur Cole. And when she finally did, when the truth was laid bare, she would be irrevocably, utterly shattered. As a senior investigator with the Viridian Heights Police Department's Homicide Bureau, I carried the weight of decades of crime. The phrase "I was across town" that starts this story comes from Officer Kevin Miller, one of my junior officers. The call had initially come through as a medical call, they said, but the lack of specifics, the raw, palpable panic in the civilian 911 call, it always hinted at something more. As Miller raced through the familiar streets of Viridian Heights, the siren of his responding patrol unit screaming ahead, he felt that familiar tightening in his gut. When Officer Miller arrived at the address on Cedarwood Drive, the scene was already in disarray. His own patrol unit, its lights strobing silent patterns of red and blue, was joined moments later by an ambulance, completing the suburban tableau of crisis. Clara and Leo, with 3 other younger Caldwell children inside, were huddled on the sidewalk outside, clutching each other, their faces pale and tear. The sight sent a cold prickle down Miller's spine. What am I walking into? Ma'am, what's going on? Miller asked Evelyn, trying to glean coherent information, but she was largely incoherent, her body trembling with uncontrolled fear, her answers choked by sobs. Miller pulled on his standard tissue gloves, adjusting his sidearm, the familiar weight, a cold comfort in the rising tide of dread. His mind, trained for protocol and worst-case scenarios, went on high alert. With a curt nod to his backup, he walked towards the open front door, a subtle scent, metallic and vaguely sweet, growing stronger with each tentative step. Mr. Caldwell, he called out, his voice deep, resonant, designed to carry. It wasn't a scene of overt chaos or violent destruction, but rather a profound state of general disarray. Dishes piled high in the sink, stale food odors lingering. It felt less like a carefully staged home, and more like a space that had been relentlessly, chaotically lived in, with little time or care for tidiness. Mentally noting that this might simply be the family's established living condition, not necessarily the immediate result of a struggle or a frantic rant. And that's when he saw him. Jesus. Arthur Caldwell lay on the stained linoleum floor, half slumped against the lower kitchen cabinets, his head tilted at an unnatural, horrifying angle. His form was almost indistinguishable from the expansive, horrifying crimson pool that surrounded his head. It had already begun to coagulate, a thick, dark, viscous mass against the pale kitchen floor. The sight was instantly, viscerally, sickening, a tableau of brutal, inexplicable violence. A fragile, flickering spark of life. We got you, buddy. Hang in there. Even as his mind rapidly processed the horror before him, the magnitude of the blood loss. The initial 911 call, reporting an accident and a bleeding victim, had been standard procedure. Officer Miller's immediate thought, seeing the extent of the blood, was similar. He must have hit his head on the counter or something, really hard, he muttered to himself, his face pale with shock. He was looking around, his eyes scanning the chaotic kitchen. Did Arthur have some type of sudden, severe medical emergency, collapsing and striking his head on the unforgiving edge of a countertop? The blood pattern, however, was immense. Too much, far too much, for a mere bump, however severe. Miller was trying desperately to make sense of the grim tableau, struggling to fit it into the box of accidental. A moment later, the EM rushed in, their voices terse, efficient, their movements practiced. They quickly began their assessment, preparing Arthur for immediate transport. "We're going to transport him now, officer," one of them said. "He's got major trauma, critical condition." Miller knelt, reaching for Arthur's feet to assist in lifting him onto the stretcher, ensuring gentle handling for such a delicate transfer. And as they carefully raised him, Miller's gloved hand brushed against something on the inside of Arthur's shirt, near his lower back. Something small, hard, metallic, and disturbingly out of place. He pulled his hand back, frowning, and peered closer at the fabric. There was a faint, clean tear in the material, and a tiny, misshapen fragment embedded deeply in the weave. His breath caught. "There's no way," Miller murmured, disbelief warring with a sudden, terrible, horrifying certainty. He bent closer, pulling the fabric taut, using a small penlight to illuminate the fragment. And then, with a jolt that went straight to his core, it clicked. The fragment wasn't from a household appliance or a piece of debris from the unkempt kitchen. It was bullet-lead. His voice, usually calm and composed, held an undeniable, sharp edge of shock and alarm. Everyone stopped. The organized chaos of emergency response froze, suspended in a horrified tap. The EMTs looked at Miller, confusion, then dawning, horrified comprehension in their eyes. His backup officer took an involuntary step back, his jaw slack. This was no accident. This was murder, or, at the very least, attempted murder of the most brutal kind. As Arthur Caldwell was swiftly loaded into the ambulance, destined for the sterile, buzzing world of the emergency room, his fragile life hanging by a thread, Officer Miller barked into his radio. "This is an active crime scene. Suspect is still at large. Victim is GSW severe head trauma." The quiet Saturday morning in Viridian Heights had just detonated. And for me, Miles Corbin, the weary voice of experience, the call was about to come. Chapter 7. The .22 caliber conundrum. The notification reached me just as I was enjoying a rare, uninterrupted cup of coffee at the precinct, reviewing old cold case files. The call from dispatch was Kurt, former GSW male victim, Cedarwood Drive. My old instincts, finely honed over decades, immediately I was on my way. "Miles, glad you're here." Officer Miller greeted me at the crime scene, relief evident on his young face. "Detective Elena Vargas is already inside with CSU." Elena Vargas, a sharp, ambitious detective recently transferred from property crimes, now dipping her feet into the volatile, high-stakes world of homicide under my men. I'd seen her potential, her methodical precision, her keen eye for detail. This would be her first time as a lead investigator on a full-blown homicide. "Vargas, what have we got?" I asked, stepping over the crime scene tape, the metallic temps of blood now subtly permeating the humid Oregon air. Elena emerged from the house, her face pale but resolute, notebook clutched in her gloved hand. "Sergeant Corbin, victim is Arthur Caldwell, found severely injured, single gunshot wound to the back of the head, currently at St. Jude's Medical Center, listed in critical condition." She glanced at Miller, offering a subtle nod of commendation. "Historically speaking, Elena," I said, my voice grave, "a GSW to the back of the head that almost always turns into a homicide. So we're working this as if it already is. Full protocol." Elena nodded, her jaw set. Her pen was already scratching furiously in her notebook. She led me inside, retracing the path of Officer Miller. The interior of the house, as Miller had noted, was a chaotic mess of daily living. Dishes piled high in the sink, stale food odors, lingering, children's toys scattered, clothes strewn haphazardly. It felt less like an intentionally ransacked scene, and more like a deeply lived-in. Stuff everywhere. Initially, Officer Miller assumed this was simply the family's established living condition. Not necessarily part of the crime, Elena summarized, her finger pointing at various accumulations of domestic debris. We made our way into the kitchen, the air now thick with the cloying, coppery scent of blood, mingled with the faint chemical odor of latent print dust from CSU's preliminary work. Arthur Caldwell was shot right in the threshold of the door leading from the garage into the kitchen, Elena explained, gesturing with her gloved hand towards the doorway. "Blood patterns suggests he was walking this way. From the garage into the kitchen. He opens the door, takes a single gunshot wound to the back of the head. The projectile seems to have penetrated and then likely passed through or fragmented, splattering some brain tissue and blood right here, by the doorframe, upon impact." My eyes narrowed as I mentally recreated the horrifying sequence, playing it out in the theater of my mind. I'm imagining where the shooter would have been standing. I mused aloud, pacing a short distance. This gives us an initial indication of trajectory and where the bullet might have traveled beyond the victim. The exit wound, or projectile path, was critical. As Elena processed this, her gaze, sharp and observant, drifted towards the adjacent living room, visible through an open archway. Her eyes widened slightly. I followed her gaze. A bullet hole, I confirmed, moving closer, my eyes scanning the pattern. Looks like a clean hit. You can tell it was a straightened impact, not a ricochet from another surface, not a fragment from the victim. The entire force of the projectile, or a substantial fragment, struck the screen directly. Elena bent to examine it, pulling out a small measuring tape from her kit. Looks like a .22 caliber. Sergeant, she stated, her brow furrowed. The entry aperture is incredibly small. The discovery sent a peculiar chill through us both. .22 caliber, I repeated, the caliber of the firearm hanging heavy in the humid air. A peculiar choice for such a violent act. Unique. .22s are usually small game rifles, plinking guns, target-practiced weapons. And usually, when something is odd, it's significant. The crime scene, stripped of the immediate emergency and now a meticulous mosaic of evidence markers, spoke volumes. But its language was initially muddled, obscured by layers of everyday life. We began as all homicide investigations do, grappling with the unknown. What had truly transpired here? We started to brainstorm, considering all possibilities. Could be a home invasion, a botched burglary, an unfortunate victim caught in the crossfire of some external criminal element, I offered, running through the possibilities common to our district. It's not entirely uncommon in Viridian Heights. Arthur Street, while seemingly quiet, was indeed bordered by areas with documented issues of drug activity, gang violence, and property crime. But as Elena and I scoured the house, every corner, every cupboard, every doorframe, the theory of a random home invasion began to unravel, systematically disproven by the physical absence of evidence. There was no forced entry. None of the doors had been kicked in. No window screens appeared tampered with. No broken panes of glass. No obvious signs of ransacking. No rifled drawers. No overturned furniture. No empty jewelry boxes.